Hello, this is Darlene with Friends of Fairview. We're a nonprofit organization dedicated to preserving Fairview Cemetery right here in New Albany, Indiana, as well as the legacies and the stories of the people that are buried right here. And so the story I want to tell you today is the story of Rosella L. Ehringer and her little baby girl, Martha Estelle Ehringer, who was just 5 months old when she died. They died on the same day, so I'm going to get to that story here in just a second. But first, let's show you Rosella and little baby Martha. So there is Ella L. Ehringer, wife of E.R. We'll get to him in a second, Edward R. Ehringer, and their little baby girl, Martha Estelle, just 5 months. So before we get to their story, let me show you who they're buried here with, okay? So you can see I'm in front of the Ehringer Monument. And on the other side is Estelle's parents. Or Rosella's parents. So Rosella's parents are buried just on the other side of this Ehringer Monument. So let's go talk about them. Okay, so you can see on this side of the monument is Ehringer. But if I go around the monument to the other side, there is Rosella's parents. She was Rosella L. Greifa. So Herman and Charlotte Greifa are her parents. And they both came from Germany. So Herman and Charlotte both came from Germany. Herman was an upholsterer, and he had a upholstery shop right on Main Street, right across from the National Bank. So you can see the Sanborn map that I'm showing you right now. That shows where his shop was located, his little upholstery shop, right across from the National Bank there on Main Street. Well, that building is no longer there, but you can see on the map exactly where it was located. So Herman and Charlotte also have another daughter buried here in addition to Rosella. So Rosella has a sister buried here. So let's go see her. Okay, so I'm right here with Rosella's sister, another one of Herman and Charlotte's daughters. So here is Elsie M. Greifa. And as you can see, I am literally just right over here is the Greifa Monument. So you can see where it is. And then Elsie is just right here. So there she is. So we're going to go back over and we're going to continue the story of Rosella and little baby Martha, and I'll see you there. Okay, so we're now back in front of the Ehringer Monument and back with Rosella and little baby Martha. Now, Rosella L. Greifa would marry Edward R. Ehringer. In 1908 is when they got married. Now, Edward, he was born and grew up in Jeffersonville, Indiana. His father was from Germany. His mother was from Ireland. And incidentally, his mother's name was Martha. So I have a feeling that's where little baby Martha got her name. I think she was named after Edward's mother, her grandmother. So Edward's father was a steamboat engineer. Edward would also become a steamboat engineer when he grew up, as well as two of his brothers. So it seemed to be like the family profession for the men in the Ehringer family was steamboat engineer. And living in Jeffersonville makes sense because that's where that industry was huge at that time, there in Jeffersonville. And so he was the steamboat engineer. He was a steamboat engineer. So if you're not familiar with what that person does, is they were the man that would go on the steamboat, and they would make sure that the engine kept running, right? They were the maintenance man for the engine. They kept it running smoothly. They fixed it when it broke down, all that stuff. So they would help with other things on the ship, but their main job was making sure that engine was maintained properly and running smoothly. They could be gone for weeks, maybe months at a time, because they would have to go wherever the steamboat was going, and they'd be gone however long the steamboat was gone. And that's how it would go. So when they got married, when Rosella and Edward got married in 1908, they eventually relocated over here to New Albany. They had 2 children together. First child, their little son, Edward Jr., he was born in 1910. So they married in 1908. Edward came along in 1910, and then in 1916, little baby Martha, she was born. She was born in the fallish sometime, the fall. Now, their house was located on where Pearl Street turns into what is now Bono Road. If you're familiar with where that is, Pearl Street changes into Bono Road at one point, and Bono Road used to be called Olden Street. So what is now Bono Road used to be Olden Street. And the Ehringers' house was the first house on Olden Street, right where the street changes names. Now, right next to their house was a little African-American elementary school. It was called the Olden Street School, and that was right next to the Ehringers' house. Now, on March 23, 1917, if you are familiar with New Albany history, you would know this date. So this was the day that a disastrous, catastrophic tornado ripped through New Albany and did tons of damage. Like over 300 buildings were destroyed, and more than about 45 people were killed. A lot of money in damage was done when this tornado came through. People are at work. People are at school, right? Kids are at school, people at work, going about their business, shopping in the markets and the dry goods stores and conducting their business and doing all the stuff. When without warning, because back in 1917, they didn't have the warning that we have now for tornadoes. Without warning, this tornado rips through New Albany. And unfortunately, the Ehringers' house and that little Olden Street School, the African-American elementary school, were right in the path of the tornado. It ripped right through that little school, right through the Ehringers' house. Unfortunately, there were children in the school and teachers, and some of them were killed in the collapse of the school. And unfortunately, Martha, little baby Martha, 5 months old, and her mother Rosella, they were also killed in this tornado when their house collapsed. Little Edward, he was 7 at the time, 7 years old at the time of this tornado. He survived. Their father was gone, so Edward, Rosella's husband, was gone, was not in the house, so most likely he was away on a steamboat trip at the time, away at work doing that, and he wasn't there. Little Edward was the sole survivor of that tornado for their house. But you can see from the pictures that I was just showing you how devastating this was. So you can see this partial list of tornado victims right here that I am showing you now. And you can see little Rosella and little baby Martha. There they are, listed as victims on this article. So look at little Rosella. She was found in a creek clutching her pet dog. So just so sad, right? So here they are. Rosella and little baby Martha died together on March 23 in that infamous tornado, March 23, 1917, in that tornado that plowed through New Albany that day. So little Edward and his father, Edward Ehringer, they would relocate to Jeffersonville, and Edward would remarry, and little Edward would grow up there and spend the rest of his, grow up then in Jeffersonville. So they just relocated to Jeffersonville, which makes sense because that's where Edward's family was, right? That's where he was born and grew up. So it makes sense he would take his son back there and remarry there, and they're buried over there in Jeffersonville. So that explains why there is an Ehringer monument. Nothing is engraved on it. The Greifa family is on the other side, so Rosella's family's on the other side. But that explains why Edward isn't here with Rosella and Martha, because they died, she was just young. Martha was just 5 months. Her mother was only in her 20s, and so Edward would go on to remarry. So he's buried with his second wife in a cemetery in Jeffersonville. So, and that's why Martha and her mother Rosella are here by themselves with her family. And they're the only ear-ringers that are here representing this ear-ringer monument. So there you have it. The story of Rosella L. Ehringer, her little baby daughter Martha, who perished in that devastating tornado that ripped through New Albany on March 23, 1917. And we just want to remember their lives and that they were here, and acknowledge their existence, that they were here, and to tell their story and to make sure that they aren't forgotten, right? That they aren't forgotten. So one more look. And there we are. Right. Rest in peace. So there you have it. There's the story of Rosella L. Ehringer and her little baby daughter Martha. So until the next time and the next story, bye-bye.